You know, I always thought these kinds of videos were a little bit cringe, but at the end of the day, I do have an obligation to disclose this to you because, of course, stock options are a part of the compensation at my new role, and so I officially have a vested interest in the performance of Microsoft as a company. Now, I thought if we're going to do a cringe video where I get up here and brag about my new job, I might as well actually try and give advice and sort of help you out a little bit because, as I'm sure you're all aware, the job market is a little bit rough in software engineering right now, and I want to reassure you that a big tech job is still possible. Okay, the interview process. That's what everybody wants to hear about, is what was the interview process like? Well, it's pretty much the same as if you just Google it. I had 4 rounds. The first one was a recruiter screen where the recruiter just called me up, said, hey, let's talk about your resume, let's talk about your projects, let's talk about your role at your current job, and what kind of programming languages you like to use, to just see if you are a good fit for what the team is looking for in the first place. And once you get past that, I was moved on to interviews with actual people from the team and from the project that I'm going to be on. And there were 3 remaining ones. 2 of them were technical, part coding and part like general technical knowledge questions. And then the third one was, of course, system design. I'll start by telling you a little bit about the role because it's not actually one that you would expect coming out of Microsoft. I'm actually working on a fully open source Linux project, if you can believe that. Now, when I looked at the job description for this, I looked at it and I'm like, okay, this is me. And I think that's genuinely more important than people realize. I understand that it's really tough, like with people doing hundreds of applications and not getting a call back. But I have to wonder, like, what kind of roles are you applying for? Are you applying for a role where you look at it and you think like, okay, this is me? Because, you know, for the last 8 or 9 years, I've been using Linux an absurd amount. And so when I get the opportunity to come and do a project in C++ that's on Linux applications, that's me. That's me. And if you look through the history of my YouTube channel, you know, I've done Linux system call programming videos. The first video on my channel that blew up was a how to do a Linux daemon tutorial video. And so when I look at this role, I'm like, okay, that's me. And I think that's more important than people are realizing. Let's talk about the technical interview because that's what everybody is really scared of, right? So look, I'm gonna be fully honest with you guys. My LeetCode performance was very mediocre. I applied to this role because I looked at it and I'm like, okay, this is me. But I knew big tech companies do LeetCode questions, and look, I didn't do any study. I was just busy, okay? I was too busy to study for this. And so I went into it having done no LeetCode, and I just mashed out a solution that I kind of was like using my university algorithms class knowledge for. And, you know, I talked a little bit about Big O, and yeah, it was not good. And the interviewer told me, like he was straight up with me. He said, look, other candidates came up with much better algorithms, but because you're such a good fit for the role, we're going to move you along anyway. And I was like, oh, thank God for that. Because the coding part was not the only part of the interview. There was general technical knowledge and a resume review as well. So I got asked a lot about the things that I did for personal projects. And because it was a Linux networking role, I was able to talk all about that. And I got asked operating systems concepts. Like, for example, what is an MMU? Do programs access physical or virtual memory? You know, what's a page table? How, like, I got asked about multi-threading and deadlocks and things like that. And that kind of stuff, I was just like, I just aced because I know that stuff. They asked me some Linux questions. Like, for example, this one kind of caught me off guard, actually. It was like, name all of the directories you can remember that are in like the /root of a typical Linux install. And I was like, oh, okay. Etsy, dev, var, user, etc. Right? Like, so it's just like, if you didn't know, and that question I think is designed, if you don't know Linux, if you don't live and breathe the thing that you're applying for, it's going to weed you out. And that's why I said before, it's really important to actually be the thing that you're applying for. What made my resume a good fit for the role that I applied for? Let's go over it. The first thing we're going to start off with is the videos that I decided to put as my highlighted videos in my project section. Now, not everybody has a YouTube channel that they're going to be able to talk about in their resume. I fully appreciate that. What you should be having instead is like either a portfolio site or a public GitHub with a demo. That's really important. There are so many unfinished projects that I see like on GitHub that have no demos. So if you think about what my YouTube channel has been, in the context of my resume, obviously I want to teach people and build a community and do all of that. But in the context of my resume, it's a demonstration of what I'm claiming to be able to do. So I claim to be able to use ePOL to write software in Linux. Well, here's a video where I demo that. I claim to have worked with network messaging protocols before and even made my own. Well, here's a video where I do that. I claim to be able to write a Linux daemon. Here's a video where I do that. You can kind of see where I'm going with that. It's still telling a story about me and how I can prove that I have the skills that I'm claiming to have. So if you've got something like a portfolio website or a GitHub with like a video demo, or even if you want to make a YouTube channel, I would encourage everybody to make a YouTube channel. Even if you don't get any views, you can just use it as an example for your resume. Like, hey, here's a demo of something I did. And you can use it as something to look back on. Like, this is what I was doing 4 years ago. That's pretty cool that I got that on video. I just recommend it in any circumstance. But the problem is, not many people actually know what kind of programmer they want to be. So how do you look at a job listing and you say, okay, this is me, when you don't really know, or maybe you don't really care? And so my advice to you is, if you're in college or university and you haven't decided what kind of programmer you want to be, that is your time to start. The point of having such a broad computer science degree where they teach you everything from, how microcontrollers work to the logic, like Boolean logic, and how CPUs work, all the way up to the web stuff and then data structures and algorithms. The point is, you should use that to figure out what you're really interested in and decide what kind of program you want to be. Now, this project was what was really a good fit for the role because I applied for a Linux networking role. And what did I build? I built a smart home automation engine all myself with a custom network messaging protocol. I did multi-threaded programming. I did async communication. I built libraries in C, Python, and Go. I built client programs in C, Python, and Go. But guys, you can bet that we got on LeetCode after that first interview, because I knew going into the second interview, if I put up the same level of performance as the first one, that was just not going to cut it no matter how good my systems programming and Linux knowledge is. It's just not going to work. So I got on LeetCode. I think I did around 40 to 50 questions, tried to cover all the main stuff. I was just fresh out of an advanced algos course at uni, like I graduated in December. And so one of the last courses I took at uni was an advanced algos course. So I already was a bit refreshed on things like dynamic programming and stuff. But yeah, the performance in LeetCode was much better, but still I think below par because, of course, I just didn't do that much prep. But that's where things like the operating systems and the networking concepts really came in handy. And so something I want to get across is like, look, at the end of the day, you can study and you can do hundreds of LeetCode questions and you can try and just memorize everything. But man, I'm telling you, just learn how computers work and know the thing that you're applying for. And internships are a big part of that too. It's an opportunity where you can actually go work in your chosen field in programming and you can try it out. And if you don't like it, well, then you know that you don't want to do that when you graduate, and that's fine. And some people just need to take whatever internship they can get, and I appreciate that. But you should at least look at that as an opportunity to try it out and say like, okay, well, I just had to do this internship. What did I think about it? Is it something that I would like to keep going and pursue with after I graduate? Another thing I would say is to actually Google the project that you're applying for before your interview. This might sound really, really simple, but all of the Microsoft applications have what position and what project you would be on in the description of the listing. And so it takes like 5 minutes to Google the project, sort of get a feel for what it's about based on the publicly available information. And in some cases, you might be able to go so far as to see what language it's written in. And if it's publicly on GitHub, you can even just look at the GitHub repos. And if you do that, you not only, number one, confirm that that role is going to be a good fit for you, but number two, you can kind of talk about that in the interview and sort of explain what excites you about that team that you're going to be joining. Now look, I kind of have the opinion that LeetCode is not super useful for real world things, and that's why I never really studied it that much, but what I have been optimizing for the last 5 years is real world and project experience, and that is what comes in clutch in the system design interview. There are two paths ahead of you. Path number one is you can just go ahead and study all of the theoretical concepts about system design. You can learn all the trade-offs about all the different databases. You can learn all about CDNs and replicas and stuff like that. Or you could just go build something. And then you don't even need to do the study, because if you build enough things and you build just a baseline intuition for how things should be designed, then you don't have to worry about memorizing, oh, well, what if they ask me to do a Twitter clone? Let me just memorize how to build a Twitter clone. You don't have to do that. You can just magic it up from your own brain. And that's exactly kind of what I optimized for. I just went and looked okay, what is the usual, like, I did a bit of research on, okay, this is the kind of stuff that they usually ask in system design. And then I just thought about it. How would I build that? What would I set that up to be? If they want me to build a Twitter clone, how am I designing that? If they want me to build YouTube or Dropbox, how am I designing that? And this is where knowing the platform that you're building on really comes in handy. Because, for example, during the interview, I wanted to use rsync for one of the components of this system. And one of the requirements was like a really strict speed and bandwidth thing. And so the interviewer just asked me, like, hey, rsync, is that going to copy the whole file across to do a diff? And I just said, no, rsync checksums. Just point blank. I knew that to be true. Now, you may be wondering, why do I have CS2 subtick up on Google when we're talking about getting a job at Microsoft? Well, this may be a story for another day, so I'll keep it brief, but basically, what I want to get across is that you just need to be interested. With whatever field you pick, once you've decided what you want to do, you just have to be interested, because for the last 15 minutes of the interview, I spent that talking with my interviewer about Counter-Strike Subtick and how the game actually implemented its netcode. Because we just got onto the topic of talking about video games, noticed this microphone right here and asked what games I play, and I'm like, oh, I play Counter-Strike. And we got onto the topic of the game's netcode, and I was telling about all of the CS2 network changes where, they introduced this subtick thing and it does this and it does this. And then we started discussing the trade-offs with the CS2 netcode. And at that point, I was thinking, man, if I don't get this job, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Because if you're really interested in the field that you're trying to get into, you just have a wide variety of knowledge that you can draw upon at any given time about that. For example, I could just talk about, hey, well, this is what it does. It takes timestamps down to the nanosecond, and then the server reassembles them and decides who shall first. And, sometimes people say that they get reconstructed, or like the person died on their screen because the client side's doing predictions, and we got into a whole discussion about that, and that was really, really awesome just to have in the interview. And the interview went overtime because we were talking about this. So at the end of the day, you just have to be interested, you have to be excited, and if you're excited and you just learn things, you've got a lot to talk about. You'll never run out of things to talk about. Something I want to encourage you guys to do, and I'll leave you with this, is to go down as many Wikipedia rabbit holes about computers as you can. Because if we're talking about acquiring this general baseline knowledge about many things, there is no better way to do it than with a Wikipedia page. So for example, you can start with a very high level consumer facing thing like a graphics card. And there are so many links that you can just completely go into and go deep, 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 deep onto certain things. So for example, what is an AMD Kaveri? Well, that is a microarchitecture developed by AMD. What's a microarchitecture? Oh, this is getting crazy. This is getting crazy. What's an instruction set architecture? Well, we can read all about that. What's an opcode? We can read all about that. And so you see, like, if you just spend a day or like spend a weekend or something going down these Wikipedia rabbit holes learning about how computers actually work, you just get a very broad baseline knowledge about various parts of the industry, and you can just talk about whatever. And whenever you look, I have this thing. I think it's way easier to go up than it is to go down in terms of abstraction. If you've been learning about how computers work and you know how they work on a low level, it is much easier for you to go up a layer of abstraction than it is for somebody who's only known this top level abstraction to go down. Think about how difficult it is for like an ordinary person who's never done programming before to learn how to do programming. But if you've done programming before, then using an email client is really easy for you. So that's all I really wanted to say, guys. I am obliged to disclose this to you because, of course, if I'm giving opinions on this channel, as I often do, then I have a financial interest in the performance of Microsoft as a company. My commitment to you as the community is that I will not change my opinions to align with anything. This channel is my own channel. These are my own personal opinions. These are not representative of the opinions of Microsoft, the company, in any way, and I want to keep it that way. If you look back on things, for example, like AI, my opinion has been very consistent from 2025 to when I did my video last year to the one that I recently did like a month ago. So my opinions are consistent. I'm not going to be changing up on you guys just because of this new role. That is my promise to you. So thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed.